The Ancestral Bear Titan is a build with big, satisfying slams, and if you're the type of player that prefers melee that's able to hit the entire screen, rather than more isolated strikes, this is going to be the build for you. Let's immediately cover the strengths and weaknesses of this setup. This is a melee build with a focus on area of effect and skill speed, and those two combined make the setup feel very smooth to play, and help to alleviate a lot of the clunkiness that comes alongside some of the bear transform abilities. It feels incredibly satisfying to play due to the massive screen-wide clearing slams, and due to dealing mostly physical damage, you'll be constantly stunning anything that gets caught in your slams. It's especially effective against those closed area mechanics such as Ritual or Abyss. In that regard, however, some of the damage scaling has been sacrificed to make the build simply feel better to play. That means that it doesn't deal as much damage as other builds, but I've always been of the mindset that if a build feels bad to play, then it's not worth playing, and that's why I've put so much effort into avoiding just that. There's a lot of areas where you could replace quality of life with more damage if you wanted to, so the options are there. And note that being a pure life build, this is also not the tankiest setup, so I cannot recommend it for hardcore game modes. Now this build has some interesting mechanics, mostly revolving around the design of transform skills, some of which have added cast times for various prerequisite states, such as if you're transforming from wolf to bear, or whether or not the bear is standing up before you use the skill. One such ability is our main damage link, Furious Slam, which adds 0.4 seconds to the use time when you're transforming into a bear to actually use that skill, and another 0.4 seconds if you use the skill when the bear is not already standing up. To avoid these extra delays, we use some weapon swap tech which we'll get into more detail later on in the video, but essentially our bear form Warcry, that being Ferocious Roar, is backed by an extreme amount of Warcry speed and skill speed, so that it activates much faster than it normally would. This skill then causes the bear to stand, which means we can immediately use Furious Slam thereafter, avoiding any of the extra use time. Now the other component of Furious Slam is the Enraged Slam portion of the skill. Using this skill will attempt to spend 10 rage to enrage the slam, making it deal much more damage, have a larger base radius, and create jagged ground. Because of this, we never want to use Furious Slam without spending rage, and we never will, thanks to having two ways to generate massive amounts of rage very quickly. The primary method is once again our Warcry, Ferocious Roar, which grants rage per enemy power in its radius, and it's also supported by Raging Cry for even more of the same. When paired with the Roaring Cry's passive trait Notable, a single use of this Warcry always generates 38 rage, more if there are enemies nearby, and we can spend some of that rage to bypass the Warcry cooldown thanks to Enraged Cry support, allowing us to essentially spam the Warcry to freely generate rage, useful considering we can use the Warcry 4 times per second. Now this would be a good time to mention the Titan Ascendancy, since we're spamming slams and we're using this class to gain a massive amount of area of effect scaling. A lot of this comes from hulking form, making all of these small area nodes grant more than they usually would, but we're also using Ancestral Empowerment in combination with Fist of War 3. Ancestral Empowerment makes every second slam become ancestrally boosted for 30% more damage and 25% increased area of effect. But Fist of War 3 doubles those bonuses, which means that every second slam we use has 60% more damage and 50% increased area of effect, which is why our Furious Slams are able to cover the entire screen. Okay, another important skill to mention is Walking Calamity, which requires glory that's gained by generating rage once you're already at full rage. So we can easily generate enough rage to keep this skill active all of the time just by using our Warcry. And that's a big bonus, because Walking Calamity not only deals a bunch of damage and aids in clearing, but it also grants a powerful buff for extra fire damage and rage generation, so we're always topped off at full rage. And of course, being at full rage is important. It not only provides 75% more damage with our attacks, but it also grants another damage boost thanks to the Pater's Vengeance support gem setup in the basic Maul attack. which is linked with a bunch of support gems to allow the attack to freeze monsters, and upon doing so, we gain a buff that lasts a long time and grants extra cold damage based on our rage. Now, considering this build is going to be in the thick of it most of the time and getting hit by monsters, we're using some interesting defensive tech. Firstly, Ferocious Roar causes empowered attacks which break armor, and since we're always using the Warcry before slamming, we always break armor for any targets hit by our slams. Therefore, we can benefit from Scavenged Plating for 40% more armor all of the time. We're also spending Rage in bear form, which naturally generates endurance charges, and we can put those charges to work using charge regulation for even more armor. However, we're also making use of the Lightning Coil in this version of the build. This makes our armor more effective against the resulting smaller hit of physical damage after some of it has been taken as lightning and mitigated by our resistances. But we're also able to make use of this to generate frenzy charges from our charm setup, providing even more benefit from charge regulation in the form of skill speed. This build has a single core unique item and a few more if you're opting for the Lightning Coil setup that was mentioned earlier. Amor Mandragora is a unique talisman that's used in our second weapon set. This item grants the Druidic Prowess buff for every 20 rage spent. Druidic Prowess grants 10% increased skill speed per stack, stacking up to 3 times, and by using Enraged Warcry 1 in our Ferocious Roar link, we can spend 20 rage to bypass the Warcry cooldown. That means that every time we use Ferocious Roar, which is before every single slam, we gain a stack of Druidic Prowess. Therefore, we are always at the cap of 3 stacks of this buff for a bonus 30% increased skill speed all of the time. Now, if you choose to go for the Lightning Coil setup, you'll also be using that body armor along with the Valako's Roar unique charm that was already discussed in the mechanics section of this video. And that setup allows for the generation of frenzy charges to benefit from charge regulation a little bit more. And the last unique that I use is Laviandra's Spirits, and this is an optional unique item. This mana flask cannot be activated, but instead passively provides a good amount of mana recovery. Personally, I prefer this over a normal mana flask as it's simply one less button to press. But note that a normal mana flask is still more efficient if you want to make use of it. Mana sustain is mostly solved via leech in this build, so when you're hitting monsters it's not too important. But I find it's nice to have a bit of extra passive recovery for using the Warcry and setting up Walking Calamity out of combat. I've been really enjoying farming Abyss and Essences in particular on this build, and the main reason for that is just being able to immediately heavy stun the Essence mobs and any rares that come out of the pits as soon as those monsters are damageable. They are instantly stunned by our Furious Slams, mostly because the damage that we deal is almost purely physical and it's melee, so we gain a massive bonus to stun build-up, and those monsters die during the stun timer. Now let's discuss the weapon swap tech in a bit more detail. I already went over the crazy speed of our Warcry setup, and the unique talisman in the second set providing even more speed from its buff. But the passive tree is where the magic is happening to make all of that possible. We're using our second weapon set points to invest heavily into Warcry speed and other benefits, such as these nodes right here, to make rage generation build up glory faster for Walking Calamity. Meanwhile, for the main weapon set, those points are all specced into damage and area of effect for attacks. Since we never deal attack damage with our second weapon set, we can't benefit from any of those points anyway, so making use of our weapon swap points in this way is extremely efficient. Our Spirit Gems also have a special weapon set setup, which I'll go over in the Gems section. The basic attack, Maul, is used to provide a lengthy damage buff by freezing enemies. Use it occasionally on weaker monsters to gain the buff, and then once you have the buff, use it whilst you have it to easily freeze monsters. Maul is supported by Bater's Vengeance, Freeze, Embitter, Cold Attunement, and Prolonged Duration 2. Make sure you're using Maul from weapon set 1, so you're using your main talisman. Furious Slam is linked to Rage Forge 2, making it spend even more rage but providing a chance to spend no rage at all whilst gaining all of the benefits of doing so. There's also Fist of War 3, which we already discussed, Aftershock 2, which when combined with our Ascendancy and passive tree, adds together to grant a large chance to create an Aftershock, essentially repeating the slam hit again. There's also Rapid Attacks 2 for even more speed, and Close Combat 2 for a general damage boost. Make sure Furious Slam is only usable by your first weapon set. Ferocious Roar is supported by Raging Cry, Enraged Warcry 1, Efficiency 2, and Tireless. Do ensure that this is Enraged Warcry 1, not Enraged Warcry 2, so that every time you use it, you gain a new buff of that druidic prowess. Ensure this skill is also only usable by your second weapon set. Shockwave Totem is a supporting link purely for additional single target, and it's used to explode the jagged ground created by Furious Slam. It's linked to Rapid Attacks 2, Urgent Totems 3, Overabundance 2, and Efficiency 2. Shockwave Totem should only be usable by your first weapon set. Walking Calamity is our other main link, and it's supported by Elemental Armament 2, Prolonged Duration 2, Elemental Focus, Execute 2, and Concentrated Area. Make sure that Walking Calamity is only tied to your first weapon set. Pounce is a really useful mobility skill which also provides a bit of bonus damage from its inherent Mark skill, which makes targets take increased damage. However, this is also a slam skill, which means you can engage with Pounce and immediately use Ferocious Roar into Furious Slam, ensuring that the Ancestral boost from the Titan Ascendancy is always applying to Furious Slam. Pounce is linked to Rapid Attacks 3, Holy Descent, Cooldown Recovery 2, and Efficiency 2. Now for our Spirit Gems, we have a specific setup regarding weapon sets. Charge Regulation and Scavenge Plating should be enabled on both weapon sets. Then Overwhelming Presence should only be enabled on your first weapon set, whilst Savage Fury is only enabled on your second weapon set. Support both Scavenge Plating and Savage Fury with Prolonged Duration 2, and place Precision 1 in Charge Regulation. You can use Savage Fury once it has enough Fury build-up, providing a nice damage boost for single target. Let's take a look at the passive tree and the Ascendancy progression. On the Ascendancy, we're taking Colossal Capacity and then Hulking Form for the first two Ascensions. This provides a massive power spike in Act 3 from Hulking Form, granting a huge amount of increased damage, as most of the nodes you have at that stage are simply damage increases. Later into progression, you'll take Earthbreaker from the third trial, and then finally Ancestral Empowerment. Now the passive tree has a big focus on area of effect and speed. We're taking these skill speed nodes here. Make sure you take these right away once you make it out of the start area, as they'll make Furious Slam feel much better to use in the early stages. Path through the two-handed damage wheel with Singular Purpose, and then onto Crushing Verdict. From there you can begin to fill out the rest of the tree, taking these rage nodes here first, and then beginning to allocate the weapon set points to benefit from that Warcry speed. Over here at the bottom of the tree, we're using a Time Lost Jewel setup for even more bonuses. Note that these stats are also scaled by Hulking Form, so we get a massive boost from this jewel alone. Gearing is very straightforward. Early on we're looking for simple life and resistance gear, and later on you can focus more on armor bases and begin to add rarity into the build if you want to. One notable stat that is a must-have somewhere, like on your rings or on your gloves, is Leech. Both life and mana leech are mandatory modifiers for this build. You only need one of each, and the role isn't very relevant, but make sure you have these stats somewhere to solve life and mana sustain. For the weapon, I have a guide to craft the ideal endgame talisman on the Mobalytics page, but anything that's similar to this will work. The Magi talisman is the ideal base due to its bonus maximum rage, and you're looking for a high roll of increased physical damage along with flat physical damage, and you then want the gained as extra physical damage modifier, which is a perfect essence modifier. Notably, that allows Walking Calamity to leech. Then on the suffixes, you want the attack gem levels and onslaught modifiers. Once again, those are both perfect essence modifiers. And ideally you'd also have attack speed, which you can force using Abyss Omen crafting. And once again, you can check out the crafting guide written into the Mobilitics guide. It's fully deterministic from start to finish, but costs can vary depending on how lucky or unlucky you get in the suffix steps. Now the basic leveling setup is also covered in the guide, but early on you're going to be using the combo of Maul into Furious Slam. Maul generates 5 rage, and later on you can also support it with Rage 2 so that you generate 10 rage per use. And that way you only need a single Maul to build up enough rage to use an enraged Furious Slam. Notably, Maul makes the bear stand up, which is why it's great as a combo early on, prior to investing into Warcry speed on the tree. Make sure you regularly upgrade your talisman. Look for weapon-based upgrades with increased physical damage or high elemental flat damage rolls. And don't be afraid to use your gold to gamble for a talisman upgrade if necessary. In the early levels, make sure you also try to get as much flat damage as possible from your rings and gloves. Iron rings especially are useful in the first few acts, so look out for those. And of course, keep an eye on the vendor for movement speed boot upgrades. Now, if you're having any problems with the build, make sure to check out the FAQ section of the guide on the Mobilitics page and see if you can find a solution there. And if not, leave a comment on this video and I'll try to do my best to help out. But that's it for this one. I hope you enjoy the build if you play it, and as always, stay tuned and stay safe.